Hello everyone! The winner of the recent gift card contest is Jonapat M. Thank you all for participating. I'll be having more giveaways soon, so you might as well subscribe and press that bell button so you can be notified for when my videos come out. Thank you for participating, and thank you all for the support. Hello everyone, welcome back to History Behind the Games. I'm still working on historical videos, so don't worry, but I felt that I should try something new. There have been many YouTube channels out there that will give you their top whatever historical games, or the best historical games of X particular year, and so have you. But I feel they are missing something. They will quickly go over a historically influenced game, but they will not analyze it for its historical content. They just merely praise it for having the content. So I figured I'd give the best of both worlds. I will be playing historical games, new and old, and giving them two ranks. The first rank is based solely on my opinion of the gameplay aspects. Basically the mechanics of the game, the flow, the complexity, and the bugs, and how I feel about them. The second rank will be the overall historical accuracy of the game. Basically, how accurate does it get the content it's trying to convey? Obviously, most games won't be perfect simulations of history. Most gamers won't stand for that, which is probably the reason we won't see Call of Duty 1776 coming out anytime soon. Well, they do have a tomahawk. No, it will never happen. Just stick to Holdfast. But there are games who do make efforts to include history. Now, just using an event is not going to get you off the hook, but it shows effort. I actually started this channel doing something similar, but I am bringing it back in a new, refurbished style. But before we begin, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and press the bell button to be notified for more gaming and history videos. It helps me a lot, and I couldn't thank you enough. But without further ado, let's get to it. Alright, so this game was a major release of late 2020, and I'm currently playing it, so it made sense. So first with the gameplay. It is following the RPG models that the later AC games have come to employ. I know, some people love it, some people hate it, and I won't argue here. But I will say for the record, while the storylines are increasingly having to do less with actual assassins and the Creed, the new RPG style has ironically brought back the assassin gameplay. The sneaking around and escaping guards, only using weapons to defend yourself if you had no other option, had virtually disappeared by the time of AC Syndicate. Now with Origins, Odyssey, and Valhalla, different enemy levels made it so I couldn't just rush in and whale my way through. If I'm alone, I need to stalk targets, use devices, and take out guards one by one. But this also means exploration is limited due to the fact that you have to avoid those high-level areas until you level up. A lot of the game is just riding around and collecting items to upgrade your gear and village, and it can seem tedious after a while. The story is alright. Combat feels more of a button masher type deal most of the time, but with quick-time Sekiro style blocks. This does make it easy, however, for gamers to pick up and play. And there is still the AC problem of the protagonist jumping randomly from or onto places or people you did not intend them to. There are plenty of enemies to try and force you to use different tactics, but you end up just dodging and then hitting them, or have an ally attack them to distract them, and then you hit them. But don't get me wrong, the gameplay is decent, it's fun. You have to think on your feet sometimes, and while things can get repetitive in some ways, the game does try to challenge you in others. With that said, the mini-bosses are a pain in the butt. Those fights just drag on. Well, that and some possess high armor bonuses and quick healing, even though some don't look like they're wearing any armor at all. It's like I'm trying to battle Wolverine. They actually make me avoid some areas rather than explore because I just don't want to deal with them if they're not part of the story. I don't mind a good fight, but some of them are just ridiculous. Like they're just there to sink your time, and that might actually be a sales tactic, but I'll stay out of that debate. But still, overall, I've had a fun experience for the most part. My gameplay rank is 3, or at most 3.5. Most of the game mechanics make it a solid and enjoyable experience, but the dragged out boss fights and the endless fetch quests to upgrade your gear, in my opinion, are just too much of a time sink that hurt the experience. I know some enjoy those aspects, but that's just my opinion. Okay, now let's talk about the historical content. I remember some old meme of someone saying their history teacher played one of the AC games and said that everything was incredibly historically accurate, aside from the Assassins vs. Templar story. And I would have to say, if that was real, that teacher should have to retake some courses and have their permit reviewed. It's common for all AC games to take history and mold it into the story of the assassins. So, real events are taken, and sometimes worked into the plot, but I wouldn't suggest writing a paper based solely on what they depict in the game. Events are changed slightly to fit the story. Usually, they'll depict a historical event with the same historical outcome, but change how the historical figures of that event got to that outcome. Now, inaccuracy doesn't make a game bad. They do have to make the experience enjoyable after all. I would actually argue that they do a good job of introducing players to those events and figures and giving a partial glimpse into that historical time period. And AC Valhalla does strive to do just that. A lot of weapons and armor are accurate up to a point and then just turn into fantasy. And other YouTubers have commented already on things such as the wrong type of armor, etc. So I won't get into that. In the game, you use a raven for scouting, and that is not unheard of. And while every Viking didn't have a pet raven to find things, ravens were used at times by many peoples for hundreds of years to do just that, but usually sailors trying to find landfall. The Bible even mentions the use of a raven as the first bird Noah sent out before the dove, and the animal shows up in many world cultures as an intelligent seer of sorts. And while this feature was originally taken to add in the drone gameplay from Ghost Recon Wildlands into AC Origins, it makes more sense here in Valhalla. Also, this was the time before cats were really targeted by religious extremists. They were used by several cultures to keep rodents out of the farm stores, so it's nice to see them not treated as evil or witches familiars yet in medieval Europe. And they have placed the codex with historical figures and locations in a prominent spot on the pause screen. But what really shows off the accuracies of history, however, are the landscapes and cities. Many of the major towns were, or still are, real in AC Valhalla. Also, players get a sense that it wasn't just Vikings against Saxons. There were many conflicts and hatred among them for sure, but by the mid-800s CE, there were Scandinavian peoples working and living among Saxons and others. There were separate communities, but there were many mixed ones as well, sharing cultures, and some even marrying each other. Oh, but there's one point. The game labels some NPCs as anglo-saxons. The Angles were another group of invaders that came around the same time with the Saxons and Jutes a few hundred years before. Their descendants began calling themselves anglo-saxons around the 8th century, to distinguish themselves from the Saxons still living in northern Germany. What also stood out to me was the Roman ruins all over the map. The Roman army had left the British Isles around 402 CE, and while the Empire effectively left, many of the Roman Britons still considered themselves Roman until after a few generations of Saxon rule. But even today, there are Roman ruins scattered all over Britain. For me, it's the little details of the AC games that really stand out for the historical representation, and Ubisoft even does that with some of their other franchises as well. The little historical elements mean that the designers had some of that knowledge and threw those items in, hoping we would recognize it and pique our interest. And it's those same features that inspire others to be more curious about the events and cultures that the AC games use for their stories. But even so, my historical accuracy rank is a 3. The little details are wonderful, but there are many noticeable inaccuracies, things that wouldn't logically happen, and reworking of historical events to fit the fictional narrative. So overall, if you're into history and into casual gaming, AC Valhalla will be right up your alley. Don't expect PhD levels of historical information, but small facets are done very well, and the gameplay flow is easy to pick up and fun to enjoy. Thank you for watching. Be sure you're subscribed for more history game ranking in the future, and please consider checking out the Patreon page to support the channel even more. Thank you to all my subscribers, and thank you for those who are here for the first time. I'm Eric the LonePineWolfman, and remember gamers, never stop learning.